Our next speaker for our Red Talk session here is Max Fineday. Max is a dynamic young leader, a nêhiyaw activist from Sweetgrass First Nation. Max is currently the co-executive director of the Canadian Roots Exchange, and he's, as I said, a dynamic young leader that when I met Max just a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it immediately occurred to me how much our young people were changing, how the ideas that our young people hold and the expectations that our young people have changed from the time when I was a young person and when I was a youth engaged in that type of work. Max is a forward-looking, progressive, and challenging young leader that calls on all of us to do more and to do better. It's an honor to call you a friend, Max, and we're happy to have you here. Please welcome to the stage kindly Mr. Max Fineday.
That was the best $30 I ever spent, eh? That was great. Ryan's cheap, too. I'll say nice things about you. Real cheap. Tual kakya. Nasigasun kiskaupi simuasa se gwawi kaskotsinia. Naskuman. Naskum tinwa. Niwakamaganak. Nitotmak. Mio kisagawanot. I'm a second language learner. Nêhiyaw, I do my best, but it's not my first language. I always try the best that I can in the way that our elders taught us, in the way that my parents told me that we must, in the way that young people across this country, across this province, and even in this very room try. Not only with language, but try with education, try with community building, try with being the change makers that we know they can be and are. I'm so thankful to be given the opportunity to come up here and speak a little bit of my story, speak a little bit of my work, and speak a little bit about what I see happening. I'm from here. I'm from Treaty 6 territory. You can tell because I'm so handsome. But I'm living out in Toronto among the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. I've learned a lot out there. And we already talked about the Haudenosaunee here on this stage. Our elder Francois talking about Haudenosaunee women. I've learned a lot about Haudenosaunee. I thought Cree women are tough, and you are. All right? Haudenosaunee women, that's a whole other story. Holy smokes, there's stories I could tell, and I won't tell them today. I want to thank Think Indigenous. I want to thank all of you. What a great round dance last night. Wah, eh? Can we give a round of applause for all the volunteers and the folks at the round dance? I heard we got our deposit back last night. Everyone was well behaved. Miwa Sin, that's great to hear. It was good to see. So many friends, so many educators, not only visiting and laughing with each other, but talking about the ideas that were shared yesterday, talking about the ideas that will be shared today, talking about the passion and the excitement that you've all had in the last few days. I want to acknowledge the people who have helped me to get here. Dallas Pelly just walked in the room, a strong educator that I learned so much from. Leah Arcand, who is doing incredible land-based learning at Thunderchild First Nation through the Miwo Bimatsawin. She was also my ride here, so I had to give her a little shout out, eh? It's reciprocal relationships that we have as Indigenous people. What we're doing here today, what I think we're doing here today, and I have to be honest with you, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator. I think I might be the token young person, right? They're like, oh, we need to hear from the youth. Youth are the future. I'm the future. All right, so listen up here. What I think we're doing here is showing up for one another, is showing up for our communities, is showing up for our students. Friends and relatives, we're at a very peculiar and challenging time in our country. It's the 150th birthday of Canada, and everyone's very excited. Nêhiyaw across the country are planning barbecues, are planning fireworks and bashes to have. I have the good fortune of traveling right across the country, talking to young people about reconciliation, trying to educate my parents' generation about what this means. And when I go across the country, whether it was Calgary last week or Ottawa the week before that, I talk to our people. I ask, what do you think when you hear of all these plans, of all these ideas? And you've heard this too. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. They say to me, what is there to celebrate? The last 150 years have not been so good for our people. Today, it's hard to be an Indigenous young person. We have more of a chance of ending up in jail than finishing high school. We are more likely to have run-ins with the police. We're more likely than other Canadians to not complete a university degree or go on to some sort of post-secondary degree. What is there to celebrate of this last 150 years? I was talking to a young woman in Ottawa who said, Max, I don't think I'm Canadian. I don't think I'm going to be celebrating the last 150 years of pain and torture, violence, and dispossession of our lands, our territories, our resources. What I'm celebrating is the next 150 years. All that we are able to do, all that we can do. That's the promise that I see here in this room today, that I've been hearing sitting at the back of the room, is the ideas, the opportunities that exist, and the chance for us to come together as folks who have been teaching for many decades, who have experience in what works and what doesn't, who have knowledge and who have caring, mixed with that youthful idealism of new teachers, the ones who have recently convocated, the ones who are here to learn everything they can, but also to share what they know. This is what I see in the opportunity that exists today. We're living in a peculiar and unique moment because for once, Canadians are talking about us. They're talking about reconciliation. They're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They're talking about these calls to action. And as a former national chief said, Canada is just beginning to see us now. This is the opportunity. The challenge, and I don't know how many of you saw the Environics report that came out last summer. The challenge is that 55% of non-Indigenous people polled in Saskatchewan see Indigenous people just like any other minority group, with no special rights, no special relationship. 41% of Saskatchewan people polled view First Nations and Métis as the biggest barrier to their own success. It's us. It's not colonization. It's not colonialism. It's not the Indian Act. It's not underfunding, but it's ourselves. 41% of people in this province think that. 60% of Saskatchewan people believe that relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people are strained. So at least they're not all wrong, right? They understand, there's a problem. They don't, I'm not sure about these Native guys over here, At least they know that, right? I can just see Chris Scribe, wiping his brow. He's like, oh my God, why did I invite Max? He's such a damn downer. Holy shit, bringing down the crowd. The last statistic from this report, 80% of young people aged 18 to 29 believe that meaningful reconciliation can occur in their lifetimes. That's an incredible number. Fully 80%. Absolutely. I was glad when I was reading through the agenda today that there weren't a lot of sessions that were discussing reconciliation. It's a buzzword. It has become a buzzword. And just as the conference name suggests, this is a place for us to think Indigenous. I'm sure as Indigenous people, those you're connected to, whether it be in community associations, whether it be, friends of friends, maybe you married into a non-Indigenous family, you get asked questions. What does reconciliation mean? What do Native people really want? I wasn't the one who did these awful things at residential school. Can't we just move forward? We've heard this. We've heard this again and again. The challenge is to take those statements, the challenge is to take these negative statistics, which we're leading in, by the way, we're leading the country in. No other jurisdiction in Canada believes that, we're our own problem, that, we're just a minority group. Saskatchewan leads the country in these things. We have to find solutions. And a part of that is investing time, effort, and energy into discussions on reconciliation and what that means for us, what that looks like for us. But I want to remind us, I want to remind those young people in the room, I want to remind the non-Indigenous allies we have in the room that as Indigenous people, our job, first and foremost, is to work on nation building, is to work on ensuring that our children are successful in schools, is ensuring that we're getting back to land-based practices. We're talking about fluency rates for young people. That is our work to restoring ourselves to where we once were, to healing ourselves from colonization. Yes, reconciliation is such an important conversation. It's a conversation we must engage in, but I don't want us to get distracted. And that's coming from the Reconciliation Prince of Canada, so take that where you will. When I go across this country, I see two things. I see a thriving population of young Native people who are educated, who are banging, actually, at the doors of post-secondary education, waiting to be let in. I see young Indigenous people who are ready with solutions and ideas. I see young Indigenous people who are ready to take to the land and who are ready to blockade, who are ready to stand up to things that they don't believe in. And I see non-Indigenous people who are afraid. They don't know what to do. They're facing, the challenge of a changing world, particularly those older ones. I see young non-Indigenous people who are open, but also afraid. They don't know what to call us, Aboriginous and Indian, I'm not really sure. I say as long as it doesn't have the F word before it, I don't really matter. It doesn't matter to me. That's just me, though. What I see, friends and relatives, is Canada at a crossroads. And we're going to all choose what path we go down. To the left of us is rage. It's the familiar story that we know, the continuing cycle of poverty, of anger, of pain, of indifference from Canadians. It's the familiar story of the feeling that you feel in your stomach when you are driving down the street and see a Native homeless person being treated not very well. It's a feeling that you see when you see a sister, a cousin, a human being who is not doing so well on the streets. It's the feeling we've all felt, that anger, that rage. To the right of us is the path to reconciliation. It's a new path. It's not yet charted. There's optimism. There's hope. We sit today not knowing which one we'll yet choose. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, that this doesn't happen enough. The problem is that non-Indigenous Canada has already decided that reconciliation, for the most part, means charity, right? And we see that so often in sending 30-year-old books up to northern communities as an act of charity. We see it in giving lesser than to Indigenous peoples. We see it in one-time acts of volunteering at soup kitchens or other places where our people exist. What we need to chart down this path of reconciliation is solidarity. We need non-Indigenous people to recognize that we are not just another minority group, that we are distinct peoples with rights as well as responsibilities. We need our own people. And I don't say this lightly. We need our own people to take responsibility and to come to the table, willing and ready. Reconciliation is going to be difficult work, ladies and gentlemen, more difficult than any of us yet know. I assure you it's worth it. You know, Indigenous people are pragmatic problem solvers. This I know to be true. You don't grow up on the res without knowing how to do something a little unorthodox, but still making it work. You don't grow up in the city facing discrimination without finding ways to meet that challenge head on. We can make reconciliation work for us. As individuals, we can chart the course that we must decide for reconciliation. Reconciliation is not going to be gifted to us from Ottawa, from Toronto, or other power-holding centers in our country. Reconciliation is going to come when folks at Sweetgrass talk to folks at Cutknife, when we face the shared challenges of each community and make a plan to move forward. Now, I have a secret plan, which I'm telling everybody, is that young people must lead this work. 8 out of 10 young people believe that meaningful reconciliation can happen in their lifetime. At Canadian Roots Exchange, this is exactly what we promote. The idea that it doesn't matter whether you're from Little Pine or Sweetgrass, where all the sweethearts come from, or whether you're from Fort Capel, North Battleford, or Saskatoon, that if you get those two groups of Indigenous and non-Indigenous young people together, they can help us chart that path forward. We can give the power to their hands. Just next week, I'm hosting 250 young people in Winnipeg, coming from every province and territory to talk about what reconciliation means for young people, what reconciliation looks like for young people, and what are concrete actions that they can take when they get back home. I know some of you are actually going to be there. Some of you are unable to make it. Some of you are hearing about it for the first time. This is the challenge that I have for you. As we're discussing this next week in a national forum, I want you to put this in your mind. Bring this to your heart. Reflect on it with your spirit in all of your nation-building efforts that you do in your community and in your classrooms. I ask you as well to think about what your individual act of reconciliation is, what your classroom act of reconciliation is, what your community act of reconciliation is. I sit between resistance and imagination, resisting all that has happened in the last 150 years. It's what my parents taught me to do. It's what my elders asked me to do. Imagination in that we can do something so much better, and that we have the ideas and the tools and the teachers to make that happen. Ryan is about to pull me off stage. The last thing I want to leave you with is that two thoughts. is that organizations that aren't of service to us aren't of service to us. We need to remember that. And that organizations that aren't of service to us will often be talking reconciliation in only rhetoric. We need to challenge those bodies, challenge those ideas, challenge those institutions, and show them what reconciliation really means. It starts with young people, and you can make a donation to Canadian Roots Exchange at canadianroots.ca. Nanaskumwan. Nanaskum Tinawa. I'm so thankful for your attention, your ideas, your action, your work, and your understanding. I didn't mean to offend anyone with these words, and I come here knowing that this is the best that I have to offer you. Nanaskum Tinawa.